This is DIY HiFi Life. Hi, I'm Chris Barker, and I'm premiering a new channel today in the audiophile world, and I've called it DIY HiFi Life. My purpose is to highlight modifications and other do-it-yourself techniques to get the utmost out of your hi-fi rig, be it a very modest system or a very expensive system. We'll be covering many different topics in the future. I do appreciate you tuning in, and if you do have an interest or like some of the content or ideas that I'm putting out in these videos, as always, it's always very helpful if you would subscribe if you desire, and also hit the like button if the content appeals to you. And I will be encouraged to create more videos along these lines and hopefully get a real interesting dialogue going on. I'm also affiliated with the DC Hi-Fi group, and I may be cross-posting videos there as well. And you want to be checking out that site and that channel as well for interesting content related to audiophile topics that cover the Washington, D.C. metro area, including Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C., etc. So do stay tuned and subscribe to both of these channels. Again, thank you very much for tuning in today. And for today's premiere episode, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite speakers of the last year or so, couple years, the Magnepan LRS. And I have 3 ways that I think you could improve your LRS speakers without avoiding warranties or anything, but you can take them to the next level. Some of these are very inexpensive, some cost a little bit more money, and I'll get into it in a moment. But again, thanks for tuning in, and in a moment we'll start off with the first of the 3 upgrades, mods, what have you, for the Magnepan LRS speakers on DIY HiFi Life. Chris Barker here, and got some interesting ideas for taking your Magnepan LRS speakers to the next level. Quick intro for the people that aren't familiar with the Magnepan LRS speakers. These are the latest incarnation of Magnepan's range of ribbon speakers. They are a flat planar type speaker, and they are often called dipole speakers because the sound emitted goes forwards and backwards. They have the capability of creating a real room-filling sound and are our favorites among many audiophiles. The LRS are the latest version of the lowest speaker in the Magnepan line, and they only cost, I think it's $650 plus $50 shipping, about $700 delivered to your door directly from Magnepan. And I think you get like a 30-day in-house test that you can do as well. These are exceptional speakers on their own, and many people have written very glowing reviews of them. I think the testament to their popularity is, I believe there's an 8-week backlog in getting the speakers. They've been so popular. So if your curiosity is piqued, you might want to head over to the Magnepan website and check out more details to see if it's something that might appeal to you. I think what's also appealing about these is they're not terribly large. They can fit into many domestic living situations and not to be too imposing from a size standpoint. So I think they have a lot going for them. Now, of course, there's a lot of things that they can't do because of their cost and size. Physics is a big limitation. It rules our world. And in the terms of bass output, the LRS have limitations. It's just a physics thing. You can look up sound waves and bass frequencies, and you can know that the lower the frequency, the larger the wave, and all that kind of stuff, and you're just not going to get that out of a panel the size of the LRS. The LRS has an adequate bass response, but it really starts to roll off, above 100 hertz, and it's kind of going down from there. But you still, on their own, they sound very, very good. But if you want to make this into kind of a full range speaker, it's very easy to do so. Today we're blessed with many options, and a lot of people like to pair their Magnepan speakers with a subwoofer. And because of home theater and other reasons, there's a plethora of subwoofer options out there. I'll talk about a couple in a moment that you might want to consider. So, and one of my mods involves integrating this sub, and we'll get to that in a moment. But let's talk about my first modification, and here we go. The first modification is very simple. In the Magnepan line, all of the tweeters, and I think even mid-ranges on the speakers that have three ways, the LRS is just a two-way speaker, they have inline fuses. They're just typical glass fuses. Typically, a fuse in hi-fi equipment is used in a power supply section to avoid overcurrent situations and to protect the electronics. But in the case of the LRS and the Magnepan speakers, the fuse is actually in line with the signal coming from your amplifier. Now, this is kind of interesting because you could get a very expensive cable, hook it up to your LRS, and think everything's groovy, but not consider that you've got a little glass fuse with a little piece of tin wire in that fuse actually in line with that very expensive speaker cable. So one starts to think, well, what could I do there to improve things? And that got me going down the road of looking into what's called audiophile fuses, a subject that's kind of raged on and off for many years. And I'm not saying anything new. People in the planar Magnepan forums have been discussing this for years. Now, I'd like to talk about actual fuse selection and what you could do to maybe do a modest increase in sound quality just by maybe changing out the fuse. The LRS just has one inline fuse. 3 amp fuse is what Magnepan recommends. They don't recommend going any higher, I think, than 4 amps, but 3 amps is what they ship with and recommend. It's a typical glass fuse, doesn't seem to have any particular unique qualities to it. And that's fine. But there are things called ceramic fuses out there in the market. So I went online and I first, of course, did the Amazon search and came up with some fuses. Came up with this little item here. And this is a ceramic fuse, 3 amp fast blow. Make sure you get a fast blow. That's part of the, you don't want anything slow because you want this to react very quickly. So I got this. It's kind of a no-name ceramic fuse, seems adequate, and tried it out. And it may have been expectation bias, I can't rule that out, but I did think that maybe I had a little bit more air there on the tweeter, a little more air there, as they say. It sounded good. I like the results of this. But I was kind of felt that this fuse was a little underwhelming in its construction. It's a little bit on the small side, and I think it could be a little better, possibly. So I went out and did a little more research on the internet, and I tracked down the Busman company, who is a famous purveyor of all things electronic, including fuses. And I was able to find a ceramic, this is called an ABC series fast-acting ceramic tube fuse. And it's kind of grayish in color. And some of the specifications, it's a ceramic tube, nickel-plated brass end cap construction. UL listed. And as I said, I got the 3 amp fast-acting, fast-blow version. And these cost about $1 a piece. I bought a bunch of them just to have a bunch of RAM. And ordered them up from the, I think, Newark. I'll put some links in the description before you can track all these down. Interestingly, this fuse seems just to be a little bit better constructed. It is a bit heavier. I actually measured it. The original fuse I had was I don't know, 1.5, maybe 1.25 grams, and this was a good 3 or 4 gram, about 0.3 or 4 grams heavier. I don't know if that means anything. I'm not an expert on fuses, but I like it because it's a little more substantial. I think it's worth tracking it down, getting a little bit better. So I installed this, and again, I was very pleased with the sound quality I was getting out of my LRS. I think this is a very good upgrade. Does not void your warranty. It keeps your LRS protected, and I think it's if you want to explore this, this is a worthwhile way to go. Another thing I've read about ceramic fuses is I think they tend to be even faster acting than the traditional glass tube only fuse. So this actually has a potential to be even a better protection for your speakers. So I will mention I've looked at some of the so-called audiophile or HiFi fuses. Unfortunately, all the ones I've seen lately are running in excess of $100. I have no experience with them. It's doubtful I'm going to pursue that. I would be interested to hear from people if they've really tried those out. I do make note that a lot of them seem to be also ceramic fuses, so I have no experience with those. If you want to spend $100, I don't know. I think spending $1 on a fuse like I'm holding here is a worthwhile try. I can't speak to the $100 fuses. That's just not something I'm experienced with. Your mileage will vary, as they say. All right, so that's a very simple upgrade modification. I think it's worth trying out if you're in the experimental mood and want to just see if maybe it makes a difference. I'll be back in a moment with my next upgrade modification. One thing I just forgot to mention on this fuse topic is the idea that I've seen purported by, again, some of the people in the Magnepan forums and that kind of thing, is the best fuse is no fuse. We're now venturing into an area that will void your warranty, and I will not take any responsibility if you try this and your tweeter gets blown. So take that under consideration. I have purchased, showing here, a copper bar. It's approximately half point, I don't know, 5 millimeters in thickness, and you can see it's quite long. I have the intention of sometime maybe cutting it up into a length that would fit into the fuse holder in my LRS, and this obviously would eliminate the fuse altogether and does have the potential, you know, if things go awry, to hurt your speakers. So this is only for someone that is a daredevil and willing to go the next step. But a lot of people have eliminated the fuses in their Magnepans and have lived to tell the tale. So I don't want to be unduly scary about it, but I don't want to have people blowing up their speakers unnecessarily. So it's another consideration. I got this copper bar off of Amazon. It's about 1 millimeter. It's hollow, but 1 millimeter thick or so. And you just can cut it up to the right length and try that out. I may, at some point, curiosity will get the better of me and I'll give this a go. But right now I'm kind of enjoying the ceramic fuse update that I talked about, and I think that's probably the best way to go for the moment. Okay, now we're moving on to my second modification for the LRS speakers, and again this could apply to all Magnepan speakers, but I'm focusing today on the LRS speaker. And this is regarding the stands that support the LRS speakers. This factory stands, while adequate to get the job done, are fairly flimsy, and so the opportunity is there for maybe doing something a little more substantial. A lot of people over the years have built their own and that kind of thing, but there are a number of companies that have risen to the occasion and sell add-on stands that you can use with your speakers. The advantage is here you're able to get the speakers going up directly vertical instead of kind of easing back a little bit. So you get maybe a little bit more high frequency information into the room, etc. The speakers are going to be a lot more stable, maybe less vibration, being wasted on mechanical losses, that kind of thing, and just letting the speaker do what it does best. I've been very pleased ever since I purchased these stands and installed them, and they do cost a little bit, but they're not terribly expensive. The ones I went with is from a company called Magnerisers. I'll put links down below for all of this information. And I went with their airborne stands. Again, they are very well made and nicely finished. The person, I think it's Robert there at Magnerisers, is very easy to deal with and does a really first-class job. They're packaged very nicely. And he even includes a nice add-on. He includes a nice piece of treated hookup wire to replace the kind of low-grade nickel bar that is used to connect the tweeter in line in your speaker there. There's a little bus bar there that you can put if you wanted to put a resistor in there. Some people want to lower the energy of the tweeter for some reason. And he has some special hookup wire that he's had treated and believes in, and he supplies that. It's kind of an extra goodie you get. So you're getting kind of two mods in one with this particular upgrade. And the price is $229 for a pair of these. So it adds a little bit to the cost, but I don't think it's unreasonable. You could do something on your own, but they look very nice. They're very easy to install. They use the factory installation of where you would put the factory stands, the screws and everything. I think it's a very good upgrade and one to consider if you're going to be upgrading any of your Magnepan speakers. So that's the Magnerisers, Airbornes, the ones I went with, and I think it's a good upgrade, something to consider. All right, be back in a moment with the third and final upgrade. All right, now we're on to our third upgrade for the Magnepan LRS. And this one's kind of interesting. I don't take credit for this. This is something I developed an idea from watching other videos on YouTube. Specifically, I think it's the OCD HiFi audio guy talks about this. And that's the fact that you pretty much, with probably most Magnepan speakers, and again, with the LRS speaker, if you really want it to be a full range speaker, meaning you want it to play the extended highs and all the lows that you can get in your room, you really want to consider probably a subwoofer. And for hi-fi, subwoofers have been a controversial subject for a while, but I think it's been gaining, again, more credence as people experiment, and also because I think the influence of home theater now, there's so many more options in the subwoofer area than there were before many years ago. The sticky point is that most high-end audiophile gear is very limited in terms of its inputs and outputs. Audiophiles have always been the less is more kind of idea. So, for instance, in the home theater world, you have all sorts of provisions for crossovers and routing of signals to different speakers to do different things. So if you don't have full range front speakers, you can route some of the bass to a subwoofer, for example, and this works out very well in that environment. Audiophiles, again, have not embraced that as much, but again, I think this is changing, but the equipment has some limitations in that regard. So what to do? Well, one of the favorite audiophile hi-fi subwoofers comes from a company called Rel. They've been around for many years, maybe even predate home theater, and really have focused initially, and still do, on the audiophile subwoofer market, really integrating, getting extended deep bass, in a two-channel type setup, a 2.1 setup, if you will. I've had many REL subwoofers over the years, and I'm very enjoyed them all, and think they do a very good product. I'll also talk about in a moment another product that's come on the market that is, I think, another great value in the subwoofer area. Now, REL recommends, and I agree with them, the best way to integrate a REL subwoofer into a hi-fi setup is to use what they call the high-level speaker level hookup, and they even supply an interesting connector to allow you to hook your REL subwoofer via the high-level connections at your amplifier speaker connections to the REL using what's called a speak-on connector, used in pro markets, that kind of thing. The problem is there's no bass management beyond just the controls that are in the subwoofer. Now this can work very well, and I've used it that way with my other speakers and had very good results. But again, there's some fine details that one might want to work on to maybe even improve things. The problem with just using the high-level connection in a 2.1 setup with your existing speakers is your amplifier is still sending a full level signal to your main two speakers, and this applies to any smaller, bookshelf speakers, that kind of thing. It's sending a full signal to those speakers, and while also, of course, the subwoofer is getting the signal. And there's no kind of blending of the two and kind of dividing the chore between the two speakers. And it might be desirable, again, along the lines of the home theater setup, to be able to limit how much bass, for example, is going to your bass constrained main speakers, again, like the LRS speakers or even a bookshelf speaker, and just offload that entirely to the subwoofer. What I propose is you divvy up the responsibilities of your setup so that the REL handles a lot of the bass frequencies, and everything else is handled by your LRS ribbon speakers. And the way to do that is using something I found online, is using what's called a high-level crossover. And these are pretty easy to construct. We're only talking about two components. And one could build this. If you're knowledgeable, you can look up the values online. This is a mathematical calculation. It's very standardized, and you can look up for a given ohm load. You can find out what the capacitor and inductor is that you need to achieve the roll-off. So again, we're creating what's called a high-pass filter. And on crossovers already have these components in them. Of course, the LRS speaker is already starting to roll off over at 100 hertz already, so it's already has its own kind of roll off built in. But of course, you're still sending that full signal to it, and you're kind of wasting some of your amplifier power on that. So one could, for example, buy from Parts Express a little component I found there. It's an 80 hertz high pass 4 ohm crossover, basically. And basically, this is what it looks like. It's again a capacitor and an inductor, just two components. And it's it says on the back here, 12 dB per octave high pass filter, 4 ohms. You want to get the right match. You can buy an 8 ohm version and a 4 ohm version. You want to buy the 4 ohm version because that's nominally what the LRS speakers are, 4 ohm speakers. So that will give you the right roll off and match. So basically, the way you hook this up is basically, and I'll have some B-roll to look at it, but you take your amplifier, your speaker wire from your amplifier into the input section, labeled input here, and please observe the right polarity. The polarity is shifted on the circuit board, so you'll see it comes in one side and goes out the other. So make sure you don't mix up your polarity, otherwise you're going to have out of phase speakers and you won't be happy. So observing all that, basically you bring your, into the input, you bring your speaker cable from your amp, and then you have to have a little output here. I'll have this all in a B-roll, you'll see, and hook that up. What this is going to do is basically anything above 80 hertz is going to go to your LRS. Anything below 80 hertz is going to roll off fairly steeply, and you want to then set your subwoofer, in my case a REL, to handle that area. Now the REL has a control on it that allows you to choose what your crossover frequency is. I think it goes from about 30 hertz up to about 120 hertz. So the midpoint's would be about 75 hertz. And so I would propose that a quick and dirty setup would be install these guys in line, and then set up your REL to about noon on the crossover. It's about 75 hertz approximately. And then maybe your level control is going to be very room dependent. You set it maybe, I'd say about maybe set it up at like the 9 o'clock position. I think would bring it up to about a quarter of the way of the level up. You could try higher. It depends on where you want to start. The other thing about that is I also would recommend having your subwoofer out in the room. I wouldn't stick it in the corner. A lot of people like to put their subwoofers in the corner. I think that's okay maybe for in a home theater situation where you're just really trying to maximize the bombast and boom. You don't want that so much. I think it's better maybe to put the subwoofer kind of in the middle of your stereo speakers, your main speakers. But either way, the advantage to this setup is that you can position the sub and the LRS or your mini monitors, whatever you're going to do this with, independently of each other. What many people find is bass is a real problem in a lot of rooms. There's something called the Schroeder frequency, which refers to the idea that at a certain point your room transitions from being a reverberator to being a reflector. So that what it means, it's usually around 300 hertz, give or take 100 hertz, so between 200 and 400 hertz, you're going to have your room and those frequencies really start to have nodes that emphasize and reverberate and increase your bass response. And often that will be unnatural, boomy, and not what you're looking for. And your ideal is to try to get that fairly flat and normalized. And I think with the separating the functionality of your, in a 2.1 type setup I'm proposing here, doing a crossover in line with your speakers and offloading a lot of the bass work to your subwoofer, you can achieve a lot more flexibility and potentially get a much more consistent, even sound, even still getting that full range sound that we're all looking for from the highs to lows. Now, I want to do a quick mention here that REL isn't the only way to go. In fact, there's a very nice product from the company Emotiva, one of my favorite hi-fi companies out there for value hi-fi gear and home theater gear. They have something called their Emotiva SE8. It's the 8-inch flex subwoofer. It sells for $299. What's unique about this subwoofer is that it actually has a built-in crossover to do exactly what I'm talking about. So if you bought a subwoofer, if you don't have one already, if you bought this subwoofer, you wouldn't even need to buy this passive crossover from Parts Express that I'm talking about. By the way, this Parts Express thing, I think it's about, I don't know, it's about $15 or $20. I'll have the links down there. So we're not talking a lot of money either way. So with the Emotiva subwoofer, it's got high-level connections, it's got LFE, low-frequency connections, and it also has a preamp in and preamp out with a built-in crossover circuit that you can select 60, 80, or 100 hertz for your crossover frequency. This is pretty unique, especially it's such a modestly priced product. So if you bought this, you probably could just do this and use their hookup guidelines, and they have an extensive description in their manual about how to do various hookups like this. and that you would be good to go. So this would be yet another great way to hook up your LRS with a subwoofer, and I can highly recommend that from Emotiva. I just today watched a very good review from CheapAudioMan, his excellent audio channel. Randy, I think is his name. He's a lot of fun and doesn't take himself too seriously, and I enjoyed his review of the Emotiva SE8 Subwoofer. And he goes into these details as well and pretty much talks about some of these same ideas. So, that's it. And again, thank you for tuning in. And I hope you've enjoyed this premiere episode of DIY HiFi Life. Chris Barker with you. Please subscribe. And if you liked it, give me a like. That would be appreciated. And I've got some very fun other ideas I've been working on that I'll be publishing hopefully in the near future. Again, thanks for tuning in. Bye.